I stabbed my fork into the roast chicken just as Kendra tapped her glass. Sharp. Clear. The sound cut the room like a blade. "We've decided," she said, smiling like it was brunch news. "You'll move into the guest suite at the senior complex. Quiet, comfortable, and close." My hand froze. The fork hovered midair. My eyes didn't leave the chicken. "It's best for everyone," Mason added quickly. "The baby's coming, we need space." I blinked once, then again. The table I was sitting at, I bought it. 20 years ago, oak solid legs polished every Saturday since Mason was in middle school. No one looked at me. Kendra passed the mashed potatoes to Mason like she'd just announced a weather change. He scooped a spoonful and chuckled. "You'll like it, Mom. They've got an activity room." An activity room. I took a sip of water. Slow. Controlled. My hands shook under the table. "This isn't sudden," Kendra added. "We've talked about it." They had. I hadn't. The baby. Of course. The miracle. The reason I'd been pushed aside for the past 5 months. I was told to stay out of nursery plans. Told the registry was private. I wasn't asked to shop or paint or even look. But I didn't argue. "You'll be independent," Mason said, shoving turkey into his mouth. "They do laundry. You won't need to lift a finger." I nodded once. That was all I could manage. Independence. That's what they called it now. I remembered changing his sheets when he had the flu, running soup to his bed, fixing the furnace myself the year it broke and the handyman couldn't come until Monday. I remembered Mason at 8, tears running down his cheeks, begging me not to die after I got a fever. And now he was moving me out for a crib, just until things settle, Kendra said. Her voice had that tone again, the one she used with waiters and cashiers she didn't respect. "You'll love it there," Mason said again. He hadn't looked me in the eye since he walked in. I stared at my plate. I cut the chicken. I chewed. The room went silent. Then Kendra cleared her throat. "The movers can come next week. We've already spoken to the director. The deposit's paid." Already paid. Already gone. I looked up at them. Their faces were so smug, so certain. In their minds, this was done. They had decided, and I was expected to thank them. I set down my fork, wiped my mouth, stood up. "Excuse me," I said. I walked to my bedroom, closed the door, and locked it. I didn't cry. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the old cedar chest at the foot. Inside was something they didn't know I still had. A red folder. A letter. A name. I stood again. Quietly opened the top drawer of my desk and pulled out a key. I opened the door and saw it sitting there. A suitcase. Mine. But I hadn't packed it. I stared at it for a long second. Then Kendra breezed by holding a laundry basket. "Just essentials," she said without stopping. "We'll handle the rest later." The click of her bedroom door followed. Calm, final. I bent down, unzipped it. Sweater, toothbrush, a pair of jeans I hadn't worn in months, no socks, no nightgown, my Bible missing, not a single photo. Essentials. I picked it up. The wheels clicked against the hardwood as I pulled it back into my room. Inside, I sat on the bed and stared at the suitcase like it was a bomb. They were moving fast, like they thought I'd roll over, like they assumed I'd accept the scraps they offered, grateful for the privilege of being discarded gently. But this was my house. I paid the mortgage. I repaired the fence. I cooked every Thanksgiving meal at that stove, and now I was being managed like an aging tenant overstaying her lease. I pulled the red folder from the cedar chest. It was still there, untouched. Crisp edges. Names inside that no one else in this house even knew. Then I reached into the closet. Top shelf. Behind the extra blankets. I grabbed the small dark blue duffel I kept zipped since 2014. I placed it on the bed. Passport, bank papers, The title to the house original, not digital. Copies of everything Mason never asked about. A few old bills with my name solo on them. Evidence. Proof. No one had thought to open this drawer. No one had remembered I used to do the finances, not my late husband. No one had thought I still might be 5 steps ahead. The suitcase in the hallway was their message. This bag was mine. I pulled out a pen, scribbled a name on a post-it, stuck it on the mirror. I hadn't called in years, but I knew the number by heart. Greer. I zipped the duffel shut. Then I reached for my cardigan and checked the pocket. The key was still there. Cold, heavy, real. I yanked open the mailbox and stared. My name was gone. Scraped off clean. Only Kendra and Mason's remained. No Mrs. Lorraine. No Mom. No Halberg. Just them. I stood there holding junk mail that didn't belong to me and let the silence dig in. Inside the TV played. I reached for the remote. Nothing. The screen blinked a message, incorrect password. Mason walked by, phone in hand. Didn't look up. We reset Netflix, he said, trying to limit screen time. My account, my subscription, but now ours meant not yours. That night I reached under the planter for the spare key. Gone. I checked again, lifted every pot, dug through the pebbles. Nothing. At breakfast, I asked casually, did we move the spare? Kendra didn't glance up from her smoothie. Oh, we gave it to Regina, in case of baby emergencies. I wasn't even worth a key to my own home anymore. Later, I came down to find the hallway rug gone, replaced. A new one, flat gray, cheap looking. I asked, where's the old one? Kendra waved it off. Oh, it was fraying. We tossed it. You tripped on it once, remember? No warning, no asking, just removed, like everything else slowly vanishing around me. That night, Mason walked in with 2 grocery bags. I offered to help. He said no need, then added, the soy milk's for Kendra. You've got regular in the back. I nodded, like I was the lodger with a shelf labeled Mom's in someone else's fridge. I didn't cry, not once. Instead, I sat in the living room while they laughed behind closed doors, and I pulled the small legal pad from my drawer. 1 name per line. The rug, the key, the mailbox, the password, the fridge. Little things. All of them. But stacked just right, they became something bigger. They weren't just nudging me out. They were practicing for a life without me. I snapped my seatbelt into place as Mason started the car. Just a quick stop, he said too casually. Bank stuff. Nothing big. He kept one hand on the wheel, the other scrolling through his phone. Kendra's been helping me get more organized with bills and stuff. Figured we should look at the accounts. You know, make sure everything's in order? I didn't answer, just stared out the window as he merged onto Main Street. Inside the bank, the air felt colder than usual. The manager, young nervous, shook my hand like she'd been warned about me. Mason took charge. We just want to review her account settings, maybe update some access. I looked at her. She looked at me. He kept talking. Power of attorney stuff just in case. She mentioned it last year. I hadn't. The banker glanced at me again. Mrs. Halberg, do you have identification? I handed it over. She opened a folder, typed something. Mason stood behind her, tapping his fingers against the desk like a drummer keeping time. She pushed a paper toward me. This is a basic form. I raised a hand. I'd like to read it first. Alone. Mason's jaw twitched. She blinked. Of course. I read slowly. It wasn't just access. It was control. Full control. I slid it back. I won't be signing anything today. Mason let out a short fake laugh. She's just tired. We'll come back. I looked straight at the banker. Print a current statement, please. Full history. She hesitated. I'll have to clear that with my supervisor. Do it, I said. Back in the car, we didn't speak. He turned the music up louder than usual. That night after they went to bed, I slipped into the basement, past the furnace. Behind the cracked drywall panel Mason never fixed. The safe was still there, bolted, covered in dust, but untouched. I spun the combination with slow fingers, opened it. Inside the red folder, the old will, my marriage certificate, and a stack of documents they clearly forgot I ever had. I pulled out the small black notebook, flipped it open, and added a new line bank visit POA attempt statement, requested I shut the safe, replaced the panel, turned off the light. Then I walked upstairs, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and sat at the kitchen table as the fridge hummed behind me. I yanked the stool from the laundry room and dragged it to the far end of the garage. The air smelled like rust and old pine cleaner. My knees cracked as I climbed up, reaching for the top shelf where the paint cans gathered dust. White beige, something called autumn moss. All half-used, all useless. Except one. Behind them, wedged between the drywall and the shelf backing, was the envelope. Red, faded, still sealed. I pulled it out, heart steady, hands not shaking. Not anymore. On the front, in my own handwriting, it said, "In case." I peeled it open on the washing machine lid. First, the property deed. Not a copy, the original. My name alone, not Mason's, not anyone else's. Next, a living trust update. Signed, notarized, filed last fall. I remembered the click of the lawyer's pen, the quiet strength in doing something no one asked about. Then a business card. Howard Greer Estate Attorney, Boulder, CO. Still in its crisp sleeve. They hadn't found this. They thought I was sleepwalking through life eyes glazed mind soft. That I wouldn't remember what was mine. They were wrong. I folded everything back inside, pressed the seal shut, and walked upstairs with it tucked under my arm. Their laughter leaked from the living room, something dumb on TV. I didn't stop to listen. In my bedroom, I lifted the mattress corner and slid the envelope into the hollow I'd carved out years ago between the slats. Not the first secret I'd kept there, probably not the last. The coffee in the kitchen was still warm when I sat down again. I sipped it, stared at the wall, then reached for my little black notebook. Safe intact, red envelope, retrieved trust plus deed, confirmed Greer, Starkert backup plan. I clicked the pen shut, closed the notebook. Mason and Kendra were still laughing, still smug, still blind. But the paperwork said otherwise, and morning was coming. I scrubbed the casserole dish harder than I needed to. Steam rose from the sink. My hands worked on muscle memory. Laughter trickled from the dining room, Kendra's sharp, clipped chuckle, followed by a voice I didn't recognize. "Once it's in our name, we'll renovate and sell," Mason said casual, like he was talking about an old shed, not the home I'd lived in for 38 years. The guest laughed. "Good timing with the market. She's barely using the place," Kendra added. "One person in a whole house, it's wasted space." Another round of laughter. Silverware clinked. Someone poured wine. I didn't move, just stood there, suds sliding down my wrist. They didn't whisper. They didn't wait until I left the room. They didn't care if I heard. Maybe they assumed I wouldn't understand, that I was too old, too tired, too slow to connect the dots. I dried my hands, turned off the tap, walked to the hallway, and paused by the wall just outside the dining room's view. Mason leaned back in his chair, wine glass in hand, confident as ever. Kendra sat beside him, wearing a cardigan she stole from my closet months ago. She laughed again, proud of something she'd just said. I couldn't hear the exact words. Didn't need to. I backed away and returned to the kitchen. Opened the dishwasher, loaded the last few plates. The hum of voices faded behind the closed door. I'd fed them, let them in, gave them heat light keys, and now they were planning the sale of it all while I washed their dishes. I closed the dishwasher, pressed the button. A soft buzz began. Then I walked to my bedroom, shut the door, sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. I didn't cry. I took out the notebook. Mason planning to sell, once it's in our name. Kendra. Barely using the place. Guest? Unaware complicit? I underlined the word our. Ownership. That's what they were after. Not space. Not family. Title. They didn't want to live with me. They wanted to replace me. I picked up the red envelope again, smoothed it, ran my thumb across Howard Greer's card. Then I got up, opened the closet, pulled out the box with my old address book inside, and began looking for numbers. I yanked the phone from its cradle and checked for a dial tone. Still there, but no one had called all week. Not Rita, not Jean from church, not even Earl, who used to check on me every Tuesday after his morning walks. I stared at the silent machine. The last blinking voicemail was from 4 days ago, just background noise and a quick hang-up. I picked up my phone and scrolled through messages. Nothing new, no check-ins, no invites, no how are you. Lorraine? I opened the old group chat with my quilting club. Last message. So sorry to hear you're not well. Lorraine, we're here if you need anything. I never told them I was unwell. Mason did. I closed the phone and stood by the window. Across the street, Mrs. Delaney watered her lawn. She looked up, saw me, then looked away. Like I wasn't there. Like I'd already gone. That evening, I sat on the couch and opened Facebook. I only checked it sometimes. Birthdays, old photos, updates from faraway friends. Kendra had posted a picture. Our beautiful home. So grateful for this fresh chapter. There it was, my front porch, my flowers, my wind chime swinging off the beam. Not a mention of me, not even a hint that I live there. The comments poured in. Wow, stunning, love the door color. You guys deserve it. Finally, homeowners yay. I gripped the armrest, bit my lip, scrolled further. Another post from Mason, a photo of the dining room, my dining room, the table I refinished with Paul the summer after Mason was born. He wrote, making this house a home, not a word about who paid it off. I clicked on my own profile. Blank. Nothing in months. My last post was a garden update. Roses finally blooming again after the late frost. No comments. No likes. I shut the laptop. I didn't cry. Instead, I walked to the linen closet, pulled out the faded quilt my mother stitched in '72, folded it neatly, carried it back to the guest bedroom and placed it in the empty bottom drawer. Then I sat on the floor and stared at the walls. They were stripping me away, piece by piece. My voice, my name, my space. But they hadn't found the red envelope, or the notebook, or the second key to the fireproof box under the attic boards. I stood, straightened the drawer and shut it tight. Then I walked outside to check the lock on the old garden shed. I grabbed my coat and walked out before sunrise. No note, no explanation. Just the quiet click of the front door closing behind me. The air bit at my cheeks as I crossed the driveway. I didn't wait for Mason to notice I was gone. I didn't need him to. I drove myself to the bank. Parked, walked in. The same young manager from last week spotted me immediately. Her posture straightened like she wasn't sure whether to greet me or brace for impact. Mrs. Halberg, she said. You're here early. I need access to my safe deposit box. She hesitated. Of course. I'll get the key. Inside the vault room, the hum of the fluorescent lights filled the air. Metal doors lined the walls, thousands of tiny secrets locked in rows. She handed me the box and stepped back. I'll give you privacy, she said. I sat at the small table, set the box down, turned the key. The lid opened with that low metallic groan I remembered from years ago. Inside were the items I'd placed there long before Mason met Kendra. Long before he forgot who built the life he grew up in. My wedding ring, Paul's retirement watch. A folded photograph of Mason at 6, holding a toy airplane with both hands. His smile wide and simple. I pushed them aside gently. Then I took out the flash drive from my purse, labeled only with the letter H. On it, scans of every document I'd retrieved from the safe behind the furnace, plus one more thing Mason didn't know existed: an email exchange between me and the county assessor from last spring. One sentence mattered. Your home remains titled solely in your name. No co-signatories. No transfer requests on file. Next, I placed the notarized letter I'd written 2 nights ago. Clear. Firm. Signed in front of a clerk who didn't ask questions. Finally, I added the original trust update. The one naming no child, no spouse, no in-law, only a charitable foundation, and one executor. Howard Greer. 3 items. 3 anchors. I looked at them together and exhaled through my nose. The manager knocked lightly. Everything all right, Mrs. Halberg? I nodded. Just updating personal documents. She stepped inside. Would you like a new inventory slip? No? Just close the box. I watched as she slid it back into the wall. The metal door clicked. Locked. Safe. She guided me out of the vault. If you need anything else, let us know. I might, I said. Outside, the morning sun had risen fully. I stood on the sidewalk, hands in my coat pockets, breathing in the cold air until it steadied me. Then I walked to my car, started the engine, and turned toward a name scribbled in my notebook. Greer. I folded the receipt and walked into the cafe. Mr. Greer was already seated by the window, a black coffee in front of him, untouched. He stood when he saw me, nodded once, then motioned for me to sit. I sat. No small talk. He opened a slim leather folder and slid it toward me. Your instincts were correct, he said. Your house deed remains solely in your name. The living trust hasn't been tampered with. And the clause you added 2 years ago still stands. You have full revocation power. No co-signature needed. I didn't speak, just breathed. He waited, then added, they haven't filed anything yet. But if they try, it'll trigger a red flag on our side. You'll be notified. I looked out the window. Sunlight glinted off the windshield of a parked car. A toddler shrieked from a nearby booth. My hands stayed still. He placed a single sheet of paper in front of me. This, he said, grants you sole discretion to freeze any proposed title transfer if someone files behind your back. It links your trust to the county alert system. You'll get a notice within 24 hours, email, text, and mail. I took the pen, signed, slipped it into my purse. He didn't ask questions. I didn't offer answers. When I stood, he stood. I thanked him quietly. He nodded again, firm. I stepped out into the wind. On the drive home, I passed the grocery store I hadn't visited in weeks. I used to know the cashier's name. She used to call me Miss Lorraine. That felt like someone else's life. Back home, the driveway was empty. Kendra must have taken my car again. I walked up the porch steps slower than usual. Not because I was tired, because I was thinking. They thought they were clever. They thought I was slow. I hung up my coat, took off my shoes, then walked straight to my room, pulled the mattress back, slid the document in with the others, smoothed the sheet, sat on the edge of the bed. Mason's words echoed again. Once it's in our name, he wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. But I wasn't hiding either. I glanced at the clock. 4:38 p.m. They'd be back soon, hungry, loud, expecting dinner. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, pulled out the cutting board, opened the fridge. And for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Because I knew exactly what I was doing. And tomorrow, I'd begin the second part. I closed the door, pulled the blackout curtain, and moved the small bookshelf an inch to the right. The camera was still there, blinking red, still recording. I sat on the edge of the bed, plugged the USB into my laptop, clicked the folder labeled Thursday, fast-forwarded. There was Kendra, in my room. She glanced around, then sat on my bed. My bed. Crossed her legs like she owned the place. She pulled out her phone and started talking. Yeah, she's totally out of it. Old slow. I'll bring the paperwork next week. I turned the volume up. We'll say it's a Medicaid form or something dumb. She'll sign. She's too polite to ask questions. Silence. Then Kendra, again, laughing softly. No, Mason doesn't want to wait. Once the deed's signed over, he's kicking her out. He just doesn't want to do it yet, 'cause the baby's coming and she's still covering the food and electric. I didn't move, didn't blink, just watched her legs bounce like it was a game. She stood, walked to my closet, opened it. She laughed again. She even still hangs up his old jackets. So pathetic. I hit pause, backed up, saved the clip, then hit record to USB. The folder blinked green. I didn't cry. Not this time. I got up, walked down the hall, and made a cup of coffee. Sat in the kitchen while it brewed. Let the sound of dripping fill the silence. They weren't guessing. They weren't sliding into cruelty by mistake. They planned it, step by step. They planned to take everything, and they thought I wouldn't notice. I sipped slowly, the ceramic mug warm against my hands. I stared out the window at the wilting hydrangeas I hadn't watered since September. They used to bloom white and wide. They used to belong to me. Now they were just another thing Kendra pretended to care about when guests came by. I finished the coffee, walked back into the bedroom, labeled the USB Living Trust Fraud, K-Call, taped it to the bottom of my sock drawer. Then I opened my little black book and wrote down a name I hadn't in years. Tomorrow, I'd visit someone I hadn't seen since Mason was 8. I snapped the green folder shut, then the red, then the blue. Each one lay open in front of me like a war plan. No yelling, no lawyers yet, just facts. I started with the red. Inside, I slid the notarized trust Mr. Greer had confirmed. My signature, the revocation clause. I added the most recent deed copy with my name alone. Then a printout of the property tax records and the quiet letter I'd written to the county office confirming sole ownership. I included a timeline dates conversations, what was said, when Kendra and Mason mentioned co-ownership. Lies, all of them. Next was the green, bank transfers, utilities, grocery charges on my old card I hadn't used in months. I printed the logins, the frozen statements, the tiny charges from Kendra's online stores. I even included the screenshot of Mason's email to the power company where he claimed to be the primary resident of this address. I kept the ledger neat, labeled every page, punched holes, slid them in plastic sleeves. Then came the blue. The USB went in first, labeled tagged, locked into a foam pouch. The footage of Kendra in my bedroom, her call, her smirk. I printed out the transcript word for word. Then I added the phone call I'd secretly recorded yesterday with Mason, where he slipped. We'll need you to sign. Next week, just one more thing so we can handle things easier. Handle things. I included the screenshot of their baby registry with my address listed under shipping. That one made my stomach turn. 3 folders, red, green, blue. I stared at them, not with fear, with something colder. It was time to hide them. I stood, tucked the red folder into an old cereal box in the garage pantry, behind cans no one touched. The green one slid under the floorboard beneath the hallway bench, the one Mason once helped install years ago when we still spoke with respect. The blue folder I walked into the laundry room, pulled the bottom drawer of the dryer vent bin, taped it behind the plastic panel, then put the dryer sheet box back in. Everything looked normal. Back in the kitchen, I brewed another coffee. Mason came in a minute later, phone in hand, not looking at me. Hey, so Kendra's parents are thinking of staying in the guest room this weekend. That okay? I didn't answer. He didn't wait. I sipped slowly. The taste didn't matter. The folders were in place. Let them bring their guests. Let them laugh and plot. I'd already started writing my answers. Kendra slammed the door open without knocking. I need you to look over something, she said, already walking toward the chair by my dresser. It's just paperwork. Standard stuff. I didn't flinch. I just folded my sweater and laid it in the drawer. She dropped a slim manila envelope onto my quilt. It's a care clause. Like future planning, long-term health stuff. It just adds your name, gives us legal clearance in case you need help down the line. I looked at her. She didn't blink. We thought it'd be smart, she said. You know, just in case. Her voice was sugary. Practiced. But her fingers kept twitching. That same nervous tell I'd seen when she once lied about a broken plate. I picked up the envelope. Inside were 3 forms. One was a medical directive. The next was a general power of attorney draft. And the third, buried near the back, was something called a Property Transition Facilitation Agreement. I read it slowly. Very slowly. You'll just initial here, she said, tapping the corner, and sign here. And then it gets notarized at the bank next week. I traced the edge of the paper with one finger. Of course, I said, smiling. Why wouldn't I trust my own family? She gave a relieved little laugh. Exactly. I set the folder down and stood. I'll just give this a proper read in the morning, I said, gently patting her arm. You've put a lot of effort into this. She stood too quickly. Great. Yeah, take your time, but not too much. We've got appointments lined up. Mom and Dad are driving in Friday. I walked her to the door. Oh, and Kendra, I said, as she stepped into the hallway. She turned. Make sure Mason looks over it too, I said. If something happens to me, I want him to know everything you've done. Her smile twitched. Right. Sure. She walked off. I locked the door. Then I took the documents, set them on the desk, and photographed every page. After that, I opened the blue folder and slipped the originals inside. I opened the door before Kendra could yell for me. 2 strangers stood beside Mason, a woman in pearls, a man with sunspots on his forehead, and a voice like gravel. Mason introduced them as Mr. and Mrs. Halbridge, his boss and his boss's wife. Kendra stepped in between them like it was her show. Come in, come in. This is the house I've told you about. We're finalizing ownership soon. It's basically ours. I smiled and stepped back to let them pass. The wife's eyes swept over my furniture. The husband muttered something about crown molding. Kendra led them straight to the dining room, pointing at the trim like it was a museum. I moved to the kitchen. Coffee. 4 mugs. I poured slowly, deliberately. Let the scent carry into the next room. Let them talk. Yeah, Kendra was saying. We're adding her to the care clause. Just a formality. She's on board. Smart move, the man said. My hands didn't shake. I placed the mugs on a tray, brought them out, and set them down gently. Mason, your coat, I said softly, reaching toward the back of the chair where he'd left it. Oh, right, he said, standing to drape it over his arm. I pressed the folded green folder into his coat pocket in one smooth motion. He didn't notice. Kendra didn't look. Cream or sugar? I asked. They murmured, distracted. Kendra laughed loudly, too loudly. It's just such a relief. After everything, we're finally getting a fresh start. The wife sipped the coffee, nodded politely. It's cozy, she said. It'll be even better once we renovate, Kendra added. I returned to the kitchen, closed the door, breathed. The folder in Mason's pocket had a printed breakdown of all withdrawals made from my account in the last 7 months. Several were marked with Kendra's name. One had the words, wedding prep, scrawled across it in her handwriting, sloppy, looped, unmistakable. There was also a notarized statement from the branch manager confirming I'd asked to freeze access, only to find it mysteriously reinstated 2 days later. Mason would read it. Not now, but eventually. And when he did, I wanted to be far away from the blast. I rinsed the empty coffee pot, dried it, set it back on the burner. The dining room voices grew louder. Laughter, jokes, boasting. And still I smiled. I moved quietly. And I waited. Kendra clinked a spoon against her wine glass and stood up. "To new beginnings," she called out. Everyone raised their glasses, even Mason's cousin Rachel, who looked half asleep. Mason stood beside Kendra, smiling. She wore a tight, white dress. He kissed her cheek like it was a stage cue. I sat closest to the kitchen again. Not by request, by quiet design. From here I could hear the dishwasher hum. Smell the roast she didn't season right. Watch her pour another round like it was her coronation. She gestured to the fireplace mantel. "It's amazing how much this place feels like home now. Not my home. Our home," she meant. Her words were rehearsed. The others clapped. Her parents beamed. Mason's jaw tightened for half a second, then smoothed. I didn't say a word. I cleared a few plates, refilled the breadbasket, wiped the corner of the table where someone's wine had splashed. Kendra didn't notice. She was too busy describing the open concept remodel she had in mind for spring. "Once everything's finalized, we'll really make it ours," she said. I nodded, still and pleasant, carrying a tray of empty dishes past the hallway mirror. I caught my reflection and kept moving. In the kitchen, I set the tray down. In the drawer beneath the cutting board sat a folded napkin. Inside it, a second key. I touched it once, then let go. Back at the table, Kendra announced cake. Chocolate. Store-bought. She didn't offer me a slice. I returned to my seat anyway. Just sat. Mason brought me a glass of water. That was new. He didn't say anything. Just set it down, then rubbed the back of his neck. Kendra launched into a toast. To growth, to family, and to the home that brought us here. Another glass raised. Another round of applause. I watched her face. Too bright. Too eager. I leaned back slightly and sipped the water. One slow, deliberate sip. Then I stood up. I pushed my chair back. Hard. The sound cut through the chatter like a blade. Forks paused. Glasses hovered midair. Kendra froze with the cake knife still in her hand. "I'd like to say a few words," I said. Mason blinked. "Mom." "Now." I stepped around the table, slow and steady, and pulled my phone from my cardigan pocket. Kendra laughed, a thin, brittle sound. "Lorraine, we're in the middle of..." I tapped the screen. A voice filled the dining room. Her voice. "Once it's in our name, we'll renovate and sell." The room stilled. Kendra's eyes widened. What is that? Who's talking?" I raised the phone, replayed the clip. "She's so out of it, it'll be easy. Just sign." She won't even ask. The knife slipped from Kendra's hand and clattered onto the plate. Mason's boss, still holding his wine glass, looked between us like he'd walked into the wrong house entirely. His wife covered her mouth. Kendra surged forward. "That's fake. That's edited. Lorraine, seriously, stop this." I didn't move, didn't blink. I tapped again. Mason doesn't want to wait. Once the deed's signed over, he's kicking her out. Mason's face drained of color. His parents-in-law stiffened. Kendra reached out as if she could snatch the sound out of the air. "Turn it off," she whispered. "Lorraine, turn it off now." I did not. The room held its breath. The recording kept playing. She's barely using the place. Wasted space. Pathetic. Someone gasped. I wasn't sure who. Kendra stumbled back into her chair. Her father's expression hardened into something heavy and unfamiliar. Her mother wouldn't look at her. Mason pushed his hands through his hair. "Kendra, what did you do?" she sputtered. This is... I slipped the phone into my pocket. Silence anchored the room. I stood there, calm, steady, the hum of the dishwasher drifting from the kitchen behind me. "I thought I said that before you continued celebrating new beginnings. Everyone should know exactly what those beginnings were built on." Kendra shook her head over and over, as if denial could rewind the sound in the room. Mason opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't give him the chance to speak. Sit, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. He sat. Everyone sat, even the ones who didn't want to. I walked back to my seat, pulled the chair in, rested my hands on the tablecloth I'd ironed that morning, and I looked directly at Mason. Now I said, quietly, "We can begin." The next step was already waiting for me in the hallway, beneath the bench inside the floorboard. I stood again, ready to walk toward it. I walked into the hallway, heart-steady steps, even. Before I reached the bench, the doorbell rang, sharp, sudden, echoing through the house like a verdict. Conversation in the dining room stopped. Chairs scraped. Someone whispered. I opened the door. Howard Greer stepped inside without waiting for an invite. Dark suit? Silver tie? A stack of folders tucked under one arm. His expression didn't change when he saw the full table behind me, the stunned faces, the half-cut cake. He simply nodded. "Evening, Lorraine." "Howard," I said. "Right on time." A tremor passed through the room. Kendra stiffened. Mason pushed back his chair and stood uncertain. Howard walked straight to him. "Mason Hallberg?" Howard asked. Mason cleared his throat. "Yes." Howard handed him a sealed envelope. "This is a formal cease and desist regarding fraudulent attempts to procure signature under duress, coercion, or misrepresentation, effective immediately." Mason stared at the envelope like it was hot. What is this?" he asked. Howard didn't blink. A notice and a warning, both filed. Kendra shoved her chair back and stood. "You can't just walk in here and accuse us." Howard turned his gaze to her. Cool, crisp. "Mrs. Hallberg," he said, voice level, "I'd advise you not to touch another cent from any account bearing Lorraine's name. Not a card, not a subscription, not a purchase. The last transfer you made was already flagged." Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Howard continued. "Any further use will be treated as intentional theft, and you will face charges." Her father flinched. Her mother pressed a shaking hand to her chest. I walked around the table, stood beside Howard, and faced Mason. "Howard has been my attorney since before you graduated high school," I said. "He oversees the trust. The house. All of it." Mason swallowed hard. "Mom, why didn't you ask you?" I said. "Because you already gave your answer." Howard opened one of his folders. "We have documentation," he said. "Phone records, video, audio, attempts to alter access at the bank, unauthorized changes of address requests, and a proposed fraudulent title transfer, drafted under your wife's email." Gasps circled the table. Kendra's face drained. "That wasn't no someone sent that without my knowledge." Howard cut her off. "The IP address was your living room. You were on the call at the same time. We have the recording." Kendra stumbled back into her chair. Mason looked at her, stunned. "You said it was just planning." She didn't answer. Howard slid another document onto the table. "Here is a restraining order draft prepared in the event either of you attempt to remove Lorraine from her own residence without consent." The word restraining hung heavy in the room. Mr. Halbridge cleared his throat. "I think we should leave." His wife nodded quickly, grabbing her purse. They stood. They didn't look at Kendra. They didn't look at Mason. They looked only at me, and then toward the door. Howard stepped aside to let them pass. Kendra's voice finally cracked. "Lorraine, please, we can talk." I didn't turn toward her. I simply picked up the phone still resting on the dining table from the moment I'd played her recording. "I'm done talking," I said. Howard gathered his folders. "We'll proceed with phase 2, he said quietly to me. "Whenever you're ready." I nodded. Then I walked into the hallway toward the bench, toward the loose floorboard, toward the next folder waiting underneath. I snapped open the green folder and laid everything on the dining table. Deed copies, bank statements, wire logs, property filings, audio transcripts, trust revocation. It was all there, paper-clipped and time-stamped. My handwriting, Howard's signatures, witness lines filled, notarized and sealed. Mason's eyes moved fast, but his body didn't. He just sat there, his mouth slightly open, no sound, just breathing. Kendra reached toward the documents. Howard moved faster. Don't. His voice was calm. Tampering with legal exhibits carries real consequences. She recoiled, hands midair. This is some kind of setup. Lorraine is confused. She's old. I'm not confused, I said. And I'm not old. I'm the owner of this house. Kendra turned to Mason. Say something. Mason looked down, then back up. Is this real? I nodded. Every transfer you helped her push through voided. Every cent you used from my account tracked. And the trust revoked last month. Witnessed. Notarized. Your name's off it. Howard pulled out another document. Your access to her accounts ended when she signed this. You were served notice. Bank records show you tried anyway. That's fraud. Kendra's voice cracked. You don't get to throw this at us now. We were building a future. You can't just rip it away because you're bitter. I didn't throw anything I said. I handed you a plate and you chose to smash it. Mason stood. His chair scraped the floor behind him. I didn't know she was doing all this, he said quietly. I thought. He stopped. You thought I wouldn't notice I finished for him. He didn't answer. Guests started whispering. Chairs shifted. Someone stood and walked toward the door awkwardly, pretending to look for their coat. Kendra stayed frozen. Her hands clenched, her eyes wide and darting. Howard tapped the stack. These are copies. Originals are filed with the court. County clerk has the updated deed. Banks have the revoked POA. You don't own this home. You never did. Kendra looked like she'd swallowed glass. I picked up one page, the property title with my name on it, restored and clean. I held it up. Mason sat again, slower this time. So what now? I folded the page carefully. Slid it back into the folder. I'm not kicking you out, I said. Yet. Then I looked straight at Kendra. But I'd start packing. I walked into the kitchen and brewed a fresh pot of coffee. Howard stayed behind in the living room, organizing the signed statements. Mason sat rigid. Kendra gone pale and quiet. They hadn't said a word in 10 minutes. The silence stung more than their shouting ever had. I poured the coffee. No sugar, no cream, just bitter and hot. Howard stepped in, handed me a printout. Account update confirmation, he said. You're sole owner again. She's out. Permanently. I nodded. And the joint investments. He pulled another sheet. Closed. We liquidated the accounts early this morning. Mason's name is gone. Everything's transferred back to your name or secured under the new trust. Kendra's tied to nothing. I took a long sip. It scorched going down, but I didn't flinch. He added, the bank flagged 2 attempted withdrawals last week. Large amounts, both blocked. My hands didn't shake. She tried to drain me before the party. He nodded. Likely. We've filed notice with the fraud unit. You'll be hearing from an officer quietly assigned to the case. Coercion, elder abuse, too. Not physical, but financial. And repeated. And deliberate. I looked past him through the window toward the backyard they never bothered to maintain. Do I have to testify? Not yet, Howard said. But they'll want a statement. They already have the audio from your kitchen security system. Another sip. Footsteps approached. Mason leaned against the doorway, not quite inside the kitchen. His hands stuffed in his pockets. His voice came soft. You didn't have to do all this. I kept my back to him. You're wrong. She wanted what she didn't earn. I cut in. And you gave it to her. You knew what she was doing. You watched. I thought you'd be fine. I didn't think it'd matter. I turned slowly. You didn't think I'd notice. You didn't think I'd fight. He said nothing. The hallway behind him was empty. She hadn't come back. Howard set his cup down. "You need anything else, Lorraine, call me. I'll walk out the front so no one gets ideas." He gave Mason a pointed look on his way past. Mason stayed in place. "You could have talked to me." "I did. You just weren't listening." I moved past him, went to the den, picked up the remote, turned off the lights still left on from the chaos. Every room they touched had fingerprints of entitlement. My couch, my dishes, my fridge. I walked back to the kitchen, refilled my cup. Then I opened the drawer, pulled out a fresh set of keys, and slid them onto the table without a word. I opened the hall closet and grabbed the suitcases. They were still half-packed from their last weekend trip, the one I didn't know about until after they left. I unzipped each one, emptied them, and began again. I folded baby clothes. Kendra had left them scattered in the guest room, even though the baby never stayed a full night. I found a bib with "Best Grandma" printed on it, still in its packaging, untouched. I didn't cry. I placed it at the bottom of the suitcase and kept going. Mason stood by the doorway, arms slack, watching me pack his life. He didn't say a word, not when I zipped the second suitcase, not when I handed him his charger and the sunglasses he always forgot. He moved toward the living room. I followed with the bags. On the coffee table, I'd already set down the only thing I wanted him to take a photo. It was faded, curled at the edges, and worn at the corners from years in a frame. Him maybe 5, sitting on my shoulders. We were laughing. My arms held him steady like nothing could ever knock us over. He looked at it, didn't touch it, just stared. Then I saw it the moment it landed. That weight, that crack he tried to hide behind silence and pride. His jaw moved like he might speak, but he didn't. I stepped forward, picked up the photo and pressed it into his hand. Still no words. Just a look. Mine steady, his flickering. Outside, the cab rolled into the driveway. I opened the door and let the cold air cut through the house one last time. Kendra appeared from the hallway, her phone in one hand, the baby carrier in the other. She didn't look at me, didn't say goodbye. I held the door as they walked through. Mason turned once on the porch. I thought maybe he'd speak. Maybe he'd apologize. But he only blinked and followed her down the steps. The trunk closed, the door shut. The car rolled away. I closed the door gently behind them, locked it, then walked back into the kitchen, poured the rest of the coffee, and opened the cabinet. I slid the porch door open and stepped into the morning air. The wood was warm already. Sunlight poured through the trees and landed in long stripes across the floorboards. I carried my coffee in one hand, steady, careful, deliberate. I sat. The cushion gave a little under me, same spot. I used to sit with Mason when he was 5, his legs too short to touch the ground, asking if squirrels had names. I sipped. The house behind me stayed quiet. No footsteps, no clicking heels, no passive-aggressive humming from the kitchen, no baby cries used as shields, no whispered plans from the hallway, just wind brushing the leaves and the slow hum of distant life. I leaned back. My mug sat warm in my palms, the one Regina gave me after I retired. Simple, white, thick ceramic with fading black letters. Still here? Still here? They took what they could. Time, energy, pride, trust, but not everything. They didn't take the deed because I'd changed it back. They didn't take my money because I froze the account before they could. They didn't take the house because I watched every signature, every request, every lie. They didn't take me. I wasn't who I was 6 months ago. I wasn't trying to be liked anymore. I wasn't begging to be needed. I wasn't confusing access with love. I brought the mug to my lips again. The coffee had cooled, but it still tasted like choice. Across the yard, a squirrel darted across the fence. I watched it climb the tree. I remembered Mason's old drawing taped to the fridge, him holding a squirrel the size of a dog, grinning wildly. I had kept it for years. I let it go last week. The garbage truck took it on Wednesday. I let a lot of things go. The illusion that silence kept the peace, that love required sacrifice without limits, that being a mother meant disappearing inside everyone else's wants. A car drove by, didn't stop, didn't matter. I shifted in the chair, ran a finger along the rim of the mug and closed my eyes for a second. Not long, just enough to listen. Silence this time didn't ache. It breathed. Inside, the clock ticked past 9. The floor didn't creak from anyone stepping out of bed late. No one cursed under their breath about missing cereal. No one slammed a door. I finished my coffee, stood up, and walked back inside.